I sat in the back seat of my black Tesla, the kind of car I used to stare at through bus windows when I was a teenager, wondering if I'd ever sit in one. The leather was cool against my palm as I smoothed my skirt, trying not to think about the email glowing on my phone screen. It was from my mother. Just one line. "We need to talk. Can we come over tonight?" For a moment, I just stared at it, watching the little typing dots disappear and reappear as if she was debating what to say next. My heart did that strange double beat thing. Part dread, part something I didn't want to name. My office window overlooked downtown Chicago, all sharp lines and glittering lights. On days like this, I felt untouchable, almost cinematic, like the city itself was my stage. But that single message cracked something open in me. I hadn't seen my parents in almost 3 years. Not since the last Thanksgiving I swore I'd never repeat. Not since I decided to stop shrinking just to make them comfortable. My phone buzzed again, a calendar notification. Board meeting in 20 minutes. I caught my reflection in the window, hair perfectly blown out, red lipstick sharp as a blade. No one looking at me would guess how hard my hands were gripping my phone. When I was 13, they told me to woman up and find my own ride home. Tonight, they'd find out just how far that ride had taken me. I was 13 the first time I realized my parents weren't coming to save me. It was a sticky July afternoon in Indiana, and I had just finished soccer practice. Everyone else's parents were already pulling up in minivans and trucks, windows down, music playing. I waited at the curb with my duffel bag digging into my shoulder, watching the parking lot slowly empty until it was just me, a couple of cicadas buzzing in the trees, and Coach Taylor locking up the field. I called my mom from the payphone outside the community center because, yes, back then I didn't even have my own phone, and she picked up on the second ring. "Mom? Practice is over. Are you coming?" There was a pause, then her sigh, sharp and impatient. "Sweetheart, we're busy. Your dad and I told you you need to woman up and figure this out yourself." I froze. Figure out how? Everyone's gone. Then start walking. Or call someone. We can't drop everything every time you need a ride. You're old enough to handle this. I remember my throat tightening, my fingers clutching the metal cord of the phone so hard my knuckles hurt. My dad's voice floated in the background, casual, like this wasn't a big deal. And just like that, she hung up. I stood there for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The sun was going down, and I could feel the fear start to creep up my spine, that jittery, hot feeling of being small and completely on your own. I started walking. Halfway down the road, I stopped at a gas station to get a bottle of water. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a braid, noticed me standing there, sweaty and shaken. She rang up my drink and said softly, "Honey, you okay?" I swallowed hard and lied. "Yeah, just walking home." She slid me 2 quarters along with my change. "For the payphone," she said, "in case you need it again." That tiny act of kindness felt like armor. I slipped the coins into my pocket like they were magic talismans. By the time I reached home, blistered and exhausted, I'd made a promise to myself. I would never, ever wait for someone to come and get me again. That night, lying in bed with sore legs and my 2 quarters tucked under my pillow, something shifted inside me. By 14, I was babysitting every weekend. By 15, I had a paper route and spent my mornings folding newspapers at 4:30 a.m. The smell of ink and wet grass still burned into my memory. My parents never asked how I was getting to and from work. Maybe they thought I was magically figuring it out. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, I did figure it out. I saved every dollar I could. Birthdays, babysitting, tips from neighbors, all of it went into a glass jar hidden in the back of my closet. When I finally had enough, I bought a beat-up Schwinn bike from a yard sale. That bike became my freedom. By 16, I was working at a diner off Route 9, balancing school and double shifts. That's where I met Gloria, the night manager, the first adult who ever really saw me. She was tall, with a laugh that could fill the whole kitchen, and she'd been through hell herself. 2 kids, 1 divorce, 3 jobs. One night, after I nearly fell asleep while cleaning tables, she sat me down and said, "You've got fire, kid. Don't let anybody blow it out. not even your family. She taught me about bank accounts, credit scores, and how to keep a little just in case money tucked away. She was the reason I applied for a scholarship to the University of Illinois, and the reason I actually believed I might get it. The day that acceptance letter came, I didn't tell my parents. I just packed my things, loaded them into my secondhand car. Yes, I bought it myself, and drove to campus. I paid for my first semester with a combination of scholarship money, savings, and diner tips. College was brutal. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to cover books and rent. There were nights I cried in the dorm bathroom because I was so tired I felt hollow, but I never considered going home. Home wasn't where I was safe. It was where I'd learned I had to save myself. By graduation, I had not just a degree but a plan. I took an entry-level marketing job at a small Chicago startup, then climbed my way up one project, one sleepless night, one scary presentation at a time. I taught myself to network, to negotiate, to hold my ground in rooms full of men who underestimated me. When the company was acquired 5 years later, my stock options turned into a payout that changed everything. I invested, launched my own boutique marketing firm, and quietly built it into something powerful, something I owned outright. And through it all, I never once called home to brag. My parents thought I was doing fine. They had no idea I was running a company, no idea I could buy and sell the house I grew up in 3 times over. I guess part of me wanted this moment, the moment when they'd finally see who I'd become. That evening, I stood in my apartment. No, not an apartment, a top-floor penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, and waited for the sound of the elevator. The city glowed outside like it was holding its breath with me. When the doors finally opened, my parents stepped out, looking exactly as I remembered. Dad with his baseball cap still perched backward, Mom clutching her purse like it was a shield. "Wow," Mom said softly, glancing around the open space. "You live here?" "Yes," I said simply, taking their coats before they could hang them on the wrong chair. "I do." They walked farther in, taking everything in, the curated art pieces on the walls, the framed degree from the University of Illinois, the glass desk with my company's logo etched into it. My dad stopped in front of the shelf where my first business award gleamed under the soft track lighting. "You own this company?" he asked slowly, like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "Yes," I repeated, steady but calm. "I built it. From scratch." No one spoke for a moment. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. Mom sat down carefully on the leather sofa, like she was afraid she might break it. "You never told us," she said, her voice quieter now. I smiled faintly. "Would you have listened if I had? Back then, every time I wanted to do something, it was too risky, or not practical, or why can't you just settle down and work at the hardware store like your cousin?" Dad rubbed the back of his neck. "We just didn't want you to fail. And you thought the best way to teach me strength was to leave me stranded at 13? The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't pull them back. Mom flinched, but she didn't look away. "I walked home that day," I continued, my voice steady. "Miles. And I promised myself I'd never wait for someone to come and get me again. Every single thing you see here, every painting, every book, every inch of this place, came from that promise." Dad's jaw tightened, but his eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen since I was little. "We didn't know it hurt you like that," Mom said. "It did. But it also made me who I am." I walked over to the wall of windows and gestured toward the city. "I run a team of 40 people now. I sign checks with more zeros than I ever thought possible. And I did it all without calling you once to come pick me up." Silence again, but this time it was heavy with something else. Not anger, not tension. Something closer to awe. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice low. "Guess you really did woman up, huh?" I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Yeah, I did. Just not in the way you meant." I turned back to face them, no longer the scared 13-year-old waiting at the curb. I was the woman who had built her own ride and invited them into it. I poured 3 glasses of wine, Cabernet my favorite, and handed one to each of them before sitting down across from them. "This isn't just a reunion," I said. "It's a reset." Mom blinked. "What do you mean?" I mean, things can't go back to the way they were. If we're going to have a relationship, there are rules now. My rules. I saw Dad stiffen, but I didn't back down. First, I said, no more dismissing me. No more rolling your eyes when I talk about my work or making jokes about me being too independent. I worked hard for this life, and I won't apologize for it. Mom nodded slowly, her fingers wrapped around her glass. Second, I continued, if we're going to spend time together, it has to be healthy. No shouting matches, no comparing me to other people's kids, no guilt trips about the past. We leave that at the door. Dad let out a low whistle. You're serious. Very, I said. And third, if you really want to be part of my life, I need you to want something better for yourselves too. I'll help you if you want to make changes, fix the house, get healthier, even go on that road trip you always talk about. But I'm not enabling the same patterns that kept us stuck before. They exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations married people have. Mom spoke first. You'd really help us? After everything? Yes, I said, my voice softer now. Because I do love you. But love doesn't mean letting myself be small so you can feel comfortable. It means asking you to grow with me, or at least stop standing in the way. For a moment, the only sound was the city outside, a siren wailing far off in the night. Then Dad nodded slowly, like he'd just come to terms with something. All right, he said finally. We can do that. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, really smiled, for the first time all night. Good, I said, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then we can start over. On equal ground. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was the kid trying to earn a seat at the table. It felt like the table was finally mine. They stayed for another hour, long enough for the conversation to soften. We talked about little things, the neighbors back home, my cousin's new baby, Dad's back pain. And for once, it didn't turn into a lecture about how I should visit more or settle down. When they finally left, I walked them to the elevator. Mom hugged me longer than she ever had, whispering, I'm proud of you. Those words landed like a warm blanket on a cold night. After the elevator doors closed, I walked back to the living room and opened the small wooden box on my shelf. Inside were the 2 quarters the gas station clerk had given me when I was 13. I'd kept them all these years, carried them through college dorms, crappy apartments, and into this penthouse. I held them in my palm, the metal cool and familiar, and smiled. That terrified girl who walked home alone had led me here. The next morning, I woke up early and brewed coffee before my first meeting. As I stood by the window, the city just waking up, I noticed a text from Mom. We've been talking. Your dad's looking into that road trip. I'm thinking about taking an art class. Thank you for last night. I didn't realize how much I needed that message until I felt my chest loosen, my shoulders relax. Maybe this was how healing started, not with a perfect apology, but with a step forward. I placed the 2 quarters on my desk where I could see them. They weren't just coins anymore. They were proof. Proof that every step, every mile, every late night and hard choice had built the life I was living now. I slipped on my blazer, grabbed my coffee, and glanced once more at my reflection before heading out. When I was 13, my parents told me to woman up and find my own ride. I thought, a smile tugging at my lips. So I did. And I built a damn good one.